Sorry about that, folks. The exercise and fitness and health stream was cut a little bit short today because of the network here, but yeah, I'm sorry about that. I basically just continued on to do mountain climbers and abdominals, but I've built up a good enough sweat that I think it's reasonable play to move into reading. Samantha, yeah, sorry about that. I was saying we don't have a poll like that here, I think, even, but yeah, I'd say if we had one, it would be a good way of exercising core muscles. Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah, let's take a look in our books. Yeah, I appreciate the joke. Thank you, Samantha. Yeah, I keep practicing, guys and ladies, piano, and I think I've gotten to the point where I can showcase Blade on stream. What I'm seeing is that, and hearing is that, the more complex a piano piece gets, the longer that it takes to learn. And what I'm needing to do is chunk the songs that I'm learning now into smaller pieces, thoroughly learn those pieces, and then begin the process of putting them together. But some of these songs that I'm learning now have like 2 to 3 different sections, and as a result, it's taking me longer to learn them. So yeah, thank you all for your patience, not just with my stream quality issues, but with the development of content of my different series. It just is taking me a while to prepare, and yeah, I just had to keep focusing on improving my skills. Yeah, I still don't have a girlfriend, Samantha. I've been trying to find one, but yeah, some things take time. That included. Okay, but without further ado, let's get to our main course on the menu today. And yeah, I keep practicing different skills. The better that I get at those different skills, I think the better quality the stream is going to be too. So yeah, it's just a constant process for me behind the scenes and in the show. Yeah, maybe Samantha. I haven't really had a lot of success on dating apps, and I don't know, it's hard to say why that is. It could be that it's like a lot of fake accounts. Yeah, it's kind of annoying at times to navigate, but yeah, it's okay. It's not my top priority right now. My top priority is improving my skill sets. And, you know, eventually she'll come around. Whoever she is. Okay. Yeah, thank you for the recommendation, Samantha. I might take a look. Yeah, it's not something I'm super duper worried about right now. I've got other fish to fry, as it said. Okay, in Sapiens, we're picking up from the chapter Pax Atomica. Yeah, I feel like I need to get to a more comfortable place in life, I think. Yeah, thank you, Samantha. Nothing. No, I don't. Nothing. I moved out of my parents' place about, let's see, how long ago was that? Like 7 or 8 years ago, something like that. Yeah. Definitely cheaper if you live with your parents, though. I will say that. Okay, but on the flip side, having different roommates is a good way of meeting other kinds of people, so it's a pro and con situation, as with most things. Okay, Pax Atomica. The independent states that came after these, and this is from Sapiens, Yuval's writing this. The independent states that came after these empires were remarkably uninterested in war. With very few exceptions, since 1945, states no longer invade other states in order to conquer and swallow them up. I think Russia tried to invade Afghanistan, right? Yeah. But yeah, I would say conquering other countries has become less common as time's gone on. That much is true. Such conquests had been the bread and butter of political history since time immemorial. Yeah, land has not been conquered in war relative to times past. It was how most great empires were established, and how most rulers and populations expected things to stay. But campaigns of conquest like those of the Romans, Mongols, and Ottomans cannot take place today anywhere in the world. Since 1945, no independent country recognized by the UN has been conquered and wiped off the map. Limited international wars still occur from time to time, and millions still die in wars, but wars no longer the norm. And I think today we'll take a closer look at about why that is. Based on the title of this chapter, as well as some of the things that we looked at in the previous chapter, the advent of nuclear weapons is one factor. But I think another factor is also trade. Like, if you're relying on China, it's less likely you'll declare war on China because of the economic fallout that would have. Okay. Many people believe that the disappearance of international war is unique to the rich democracies of Western Europe. Excuse me. In fact, peace reached Europe after it prevailed in other parts of the world. Thus, the last serious international wars between South American countries were the Peru-Ecuador War of 1941 and the Bolivia-Paraguay War of 1932 to 1935. And before that, there hadn't been a serious war between South American countries since 1879 to 1884, with Chile on one side and Bolivia and Peru on the other. Yeah. I think self-determination is another factor. It's like, if you look at what was going on in the United States heading into World War II, it's like the United States had a very isolationist policy. The United States didn't jump into war on the side of the Allied powers. They waited until the attack on Pearl Harbor before officially entering the war. And if you look at the reasons why that is, I think probably the prevailing explanation is economic concerns. It's like countries want to do well. And if they're sucked into conflict, there's a lot of resources that need to be poured into war efforts. If you look at the fallout of World War I, for example, it's like a lot of countries were in a lot of debt. They spent a lot of money to finance the war, to provide resources to soldiers, to buy stuff like guns, ammunition, weapons. Yeah. And if countries are focusing on peace, it's easier to promote the national economy. We seldom think of the Arab world as particularly peaceful. Yet only once since the Arab countries won their independence has one of them mounted a full-scale invasion of another, the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in 1990. There have been quite a few border clashes. Syria versus Jordan in 1970. Many armed interventions of one of the... hang on a second. Many armed interventions of one in the affairs of another, Syria and Lebanon. Numerous civil wars, Algeria, Yemen, and Libya, and an abundance of coups and revolts. I would say the nature behind a lot of these conflicts has been political reasons. Political and, again, resource. It's like that same concept. It's like the value of oil is the reason why the invasion of Iraq occurred. It was a war over resources. Yet there have been no full-scale international wars among the Arab states except the Gulf War. Even widening the scope to include the entire Muslim world adds only one more example, the Iran-Iraq War. There was no Turkey-Iran war, Pakistan-Afghanistan war, or Indonesia-Malaysian war. Ideas and ideologies also play a part in it too. It's like you're not going to declare war on somebody who is allied with you or who shares similar beliefs. Yeah, it's like the U.S. is not going to declare war on Britain, for like one example. It's like it just doesn't make sense. Right. In Africa, things are far less rosy. But even there, most conflicts are civil wars and coups. Since the African states won their independence in the 1960s and 70s, very few countries have invaded one another in the hope of conquest. There have been periods of relative calm before, as for example in Europe between 1871 and 1914. And they always ended badly. Evil doesn't give any examples though. He's saying it's the periods of calm that ended badly here, but I'm not sure what he's referring to. But this time it is different. Real peace is not the mere absence of war. Real peace is the implausibility of war. There's never been a real peace in the world. It's like as long as war is possible, as long as war is on the horizon, it's not true peace. It's only, what do they call it? I don't know. If I can remember it, I'll talk about it. It's like a temporary peace. Right? There has never been a real peace in the world. Between 1871 and 1914, a European war remained a plausible eventuality. And the expectation of war dominated the thinking of armies, politicians, and ordinary citizens alike. It's like everyone was wondering, it's like, when's war gonna break out? And of course the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand is what kicked everything off. This foreboding was true for all other peaceful periods in history. An iron law of international politics decreed for every two nearby polities there is a plausible scenario that will cause them to go to war against one another within 1 year. This law of the jungle was in force in late 19th century Europe, in medieval Europe, in ancient China, and in classic Greece. If Sparta and Athens were at peace in 450 BC, there was a plausible scenario that they would be at war by 449 BC. And yes, it's like nationalism plays a role. It's like if you need more land, what are you going to do? You're going to go to war with the Native Americans. Today, humankind has broken the law of the jungle. There is at last real peace, and not just absence of war. For most polities, there is no plausible scenario leading to a full-scale conflict within 1 year. What could lead to war between Germany and France next year? Let me make sure I'm caught up on chat before I continue. Samantha, a Discord channel. I can. It's like one of these things that's like, I need to think about how to format it and structure it. I'd say that's probably the main reason why I don't have one yet. I just need to think about the correct way to present it to you guys, to you all. And yeah, structure. There's a lot of planning that I need to do, basically. But yes, good question. And once I have it figured out, I can roll it out. Alright, well, let's see. What could lead to war between Germany and France next year? Yeah, I would say it's extremely unlikely. Like, yeah, it's fantastically unlikely, and the reason for that is because France has no reason to. It's like, yeah, like Germany and France are, I would say, more aligned today than they were some 60 years ago during World War II. It's like those ideas and ideologies, the more people relate, the less likely it is that there will be a conflict. Yeah, true, Samantha. I don't know, think about it. Dr. Pepper. Cherry. War between China and Japan. Even during World War II, it's like Japan was engaged in several conflicts with China. And that was in the context of World War II, but today, there just isn't the same incentive, basically. Or between Brazil and Argentina. Some minor border clash might occur, but only a truly apocalyptic scenario could result in an old-fashioned full-scale war between Brazil and Argentina in 2014, with Argentinian armored divisions sweeping to the gates of Rio, and Brazilian carpet bombers pulverizing the neighborhoods of Buenos Aires. Yeah, it's like there needs to be reason enough for these nations to declare war. Like that's what it all comes down to. It's like that you gotta have a reason for declaring war on somebody. And even America and China with the pandemic situation, it's like even then war isn't declared because number one of nukes and number two economics. It's like international relations. Such wars might still erupt between several pairs of states, for example between Israel and Syria, Ethiopia and Eritrea, or the USA and Iran, but these are only exceptions that prove the rule. The situation might of course change in the future, and with hindsight the world of today might seem incredibly naive. Yet from a historical perspective, our very naivete is fascinating. Never before has peace been so prevalent that people could not even imagine war. Gold miners in California during the gold rush. Alright, let me show you all. Beautiful gold. They're all panning for gold. And that is how California gets its name, the Golden State. Scholars have sought to explain this by... Scholars have sought to explain this happy development in more books and articles than you would even want to read yourself. And they have identified several contributing factors. First and foremost, the price of war has gone up dramatically. Something I've already referenced and alluded to. It's like you simply cannot go to war without considering the price of war. And the dead is not the only price. First and foremost, the price has gone up. The Nobel Peace Prize to end all peace prizes should have been given to Robert Oppenheimer and his fellow architects of the atomic bomb. Something else I've referenced. It's like the possibility of nuclear apocalypse has basically forced an end to a lot of different possibilities for war. Nuclear weapons have turned war between superpowers into collective suicide. It made it impossible to seek world domination by force of arms. It's like that right there is the reason why Russia hasn't tried to take over the world yet. Or China or the United States. Because once they start overstepping certain types of boundaries, it's like it could be doomed on a massive scale. Secondly, while the price of war soared, its profits declined. For most of history, polities could enrich themselves by looting or annexing enemy territories. Most wealth consisted of material things like fields, cattle, slaves, and gold, so it was easy to loot it or occupy it. Today, wealth consists mainly of human capital and organizational know-how. Consequently, it is difficult to carry it off or conquer it by military force. The plunder of war is less transferable than it was in times past. Consider California. Its wealth was initially built on gold mines, but today it is built on silicon and celluloid. Silicon Valley and the celluloid hills of Hollywood. What would happen if the Chinese were to mount an armed invasion of California? I'm amused by the possibility. By the scenario, I guess. Land 1 million soldiers on the beaches of San Francisco and storm inland. They would gain little. Yeah, not only that, but Joe Biden would declare war on China as a result. Like, they wouldn't just be going to war with California. They'd be going to war with the United States at that point. They would gain little. There are no silicon mines in Silicon Valley. The wealth resides in the minds of Google engineers and Hollywood script doctors, directors, and special effects wizards who would be on the first plane to Bangalore or Mumbai long before the Chinese tanks rolled onto Sunset Boulevard. Yeah, like, it's become less material and more personal. Like, unless you're, like, committing Jeff Bezos into slavery, like, there's not really a whole lot you can do. Even China, I don't think, could do that. Unless they had, like, Chinese spies or something. You can pull it off. It is not coincidental that the full scale of a few international wars that still take place in the world, such as the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, occur in places where wealth is old-fashioned material wealth. The Kuwaiti sheiks could flee abroad, but the oil fields stayed put and were occupied. Okay, we have an image of Facebook's headquarters near San Francisco. In 1849, California built its fortunes on gold. Today, California builds its fortunes on silicon. Whereas in 1849, the gold actually lay there in the California soil, the real treasures of Silicon Valley are locked inside the heads of high-tech employees. And let me show you. That's Facebook headquarters. That is. Musicator un poco. Mostly English. Hablo inglés. Yeah. I've never gotten to the point where I could speak Spanish like fluently. And that's just what I tell people. It's like I can't speak Spanish. I keep practicing. Spanish is like a lot of things for me at this point in my life. It's like if I practice it every single day, I can learn how to speak it. But if I'm not using it every single day, I forget. And I don't know how to say certain things. Like, I can't speak in Spanish the way I'm speaking to all of you in English right now. I just don't have that language-based knowledge. So sorry about that, Musicator. Hopefully you can translate on your end to make sense of what I'm saying. Yeah, sorry about that. While war became less profitable, peace became more lucrative than ever. In traditional agricultural economies, long-distance trade and foreign investment were sideshows. Consequently, peace brought little profit, aside from avoiding the cost of war. If, say, in 1400 England and France were at peace, the French did not have to pay heavy war taxes and to suffer destructive English invasions. But otherwise, it did not benefit their wallets. In modern capitalist economies, foreign trade and investments have become all important. Peace, therefore, brings unique dividends. As long as China and the USA are at peace, the Chinese can prosper by selling products to the USA, trading Wall Street, and receiving US investments. Exactly. Dinero, musicator. It's like, once the US declares war on China, a lot of that trade is going to stop. And a lot of the US and Chinese, I'd say a huge portion of the US economy is based on China. That's just how it is. It's like we've been buying stuff from them for so long, it's like the stock market would basically crash the minute we declared war on China. Yeah, it's interesting to think about though, for sure. Last but not least, a tectonic shift has taken place in global political culture. Many elites in history, Han chieftains, Viking noblemen, and Aztec priests, for example, viewed war as a positive good. Others viewed it as evil, but an inevitable one, which we had better turn to our own advantage. Yeah, I would say some societies have viewed war as like, just like a ritual. Yeah, it's like glory. Ours is the first time in history that the world is dominated by a peace-loving elite. Politicians, business people, intellectuals, and artists who genuinely see war as both evil and avoidable. There were pacifists in the past, such as early Christians, but in the rare cases that they gained power, they tended to forget about the requirement to turn the other cheek. There's positive feedback loop between all these four factors. The threat of nuclear holocaust fosters pacifism. When pacifism spreads, war recedes and trade flourishes, and trade increases both the profits of peace and the cost of war. Over time, this feedback loop creates another obstacle to war, which may ultimately prove the most important of all. The tightening web of international connections erodes the independence of most countries, lessening the chance that any one of them might single-handedly let slip the dogs of war. Most countries no longer engage in full-scale war for the simple reason that they are no longer independent. Though citizens in Israel, Italy, Mexico, or Thailand may harbor illusions of independence, the fact is that their governments cannot conduct independent economic or foreign policies, and they are certainly incapable of initiating or conducting full-scale war on their own. It's like, yeah, look at the European Union. Like, that's one example. Countries had just grown to rely on each other over time. And as long as that is the case, it makes even less sense than before to declare war on anybody. As explained in Chapter 11, we're witnessing the formation of a global empire. Like previous empires, this one too enforces peace within its borders. Since its borders cover the entire globe, the world empire effectively enforces world peace. It's like nowadays, political leaders need to use diplomacy and negotiations to achieve goals, objectives, and aims. So is the modern era one of mindless slaughter, war, and oppression, typified by the trenches of World War I, the nuclear mushroom cloud over Hiroshima, and the gory manias of Hitler and Stalin? Or is it an era of peace, epitomized by the trenches never dug in South America, the mushroom clouds that never appeared over Moscow and New York, and the serene visages of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King? The answer is a matter of timing. It's sobering to realize how often our view of the past is distorted by events of the last few years. If this chapter had been written in 1945 or 1962, it probably would have been much more glum. Since it was written in 2014, it takes a relatively buoyant approach to modern history. To satisfy both optimists and pessimists, we may conclude by saying that we are on the threshold of both heaven and hell, moving nervously between the gateway of one and the anteroom of the other. History is still not decided where we will end up, and the string of coincidences might yet send us rolling in either direction. Yeah, we're pretty close to the end of Sapiens. Let's take a look at War and Peace. I think that Yuval highlights a lot of the key considerations about the nature of peace in a modern context. Okay, War and Peace, we're in chapter 22. While these conversations were going on in the reception room and the princess's room, a carriage containing Pierre, who had been sent for, and Anna Mikhailovna, who found it necessary to accompany him, was driving into the court of Count Bezukov's house. As the wheels rolled softly over the straw beneath the windows, Anna Mikhailovna, having turned with words of comfort to her companion, realized that he was asleep in his corner and woke him up. Rousing himself, Pierre followed Anna Mikhailovna out of the carriage, and only then began to think of the interview with his dying father, which awaited him. Count Bezukov wants Pierre to get the inheritance. He's writing a letter. In the last chapter, Prince Vasily and Princess Catherine are trying to get what they can of the Count's fortune. He noticed they had not come to the front entrance but to the back door. While he was getting down from the carriage steps, two men who looked like tradespeople ran hurriedly from the entrance and hid in the shadow of the wall. Pausing for a moment, Pierre noticed several other men of the same kind hiding in the shadow of the house on both sides. But neither Anna Mikhailovna nor the footman nor the coachman, who could not help seeing these people, took any notice of them. I wonder, is it going to be some sort of ambush? Who knows? Seems to be all right, Pierre concluded and followed Anna Mikhailovna. She hurriedly ascended the narrow, dimly lit stone staircase, calling to Pierre, who was lagging behind, to follow. Though he did not see why it was necessary for him to go to the Count at all, still less why he had to go back by the back stairs. Yet, judging by Anna Mikhailovna's air of assurance and haste, Pierre concluded that it was all absolutely necessary. Halfway up the stairs, they were almost knocked over by some men who, carrying pails, came running downstairs, their boots clattering. These men pressed close to the wall to let Pierre and Anna Mikhailovna pass, and did not evince the least surprise at seeing them there. "Is this the way to the princess's apartments?" asked Anna Mikhailovna of one of them. "Yes," replied a footman in a bold, loud voice, as if anything were now permissible. "The door to the left, ma'am." "Perhaps the Count did not ask for me," said Pierre when he reached the landing. "I'd better go to my own room." Anna Mikhailovna paused and waited for him to come up. "Ah, my friend," she said, touching his arm as she had done her son's, when speaking to him that afternoon. "Believe me, I suffer no less than you do, but be a man. Be a man." As mysterious as the dark side of the moon. "But really, hadn't I better go away?" he asked, looking kindly at her over his spectacles. "Ah, my dear friend, forget the wrongs that may have been done you. Think that he is your father, perhaps in the agony of death." She sighed. "I have loved you like a son from the first. Trust yourself to me, Pierre. I shall not forget your interests." Pierre did not understand a word, but the conviction that all this had to be grew stronger, and he meekly followed Anna Mikhailovna, who was already opening a door. The door led into a back anteroom. An old man, a servant of the princess's, sat in a corner knitting a stocking. Pierre had never been in this part of the house and did not even know the existence of these rooms. Anna Mikhailovna, addressing a maid who was hurriedly past with a decanter on the tray as "my dear, my sweet," asked about the princess's health, and then led Pierre along a stone passage. The first door on the left led into the princess's apartments. The maid with the decanter in her haste had not closed the door. Decanter is a glass container for wine. Okay. Pierre and Anna Mikhailovna, in passing, instinctively glanced into the room where Prince Vasily and the eldest princess were sitting close together talking. Seeing them pass, Prince Vasily drew back with an obvious impatience, while the princess jumped up and, with a gesture of desperation, slammed the door with all her might. It's like she doesn't want him eavesdropping. I'll be right back. Gotta use the bathroom. Refill too. Stand by. action was so unlike her usual composure, and the fear depicted on Prince Vasili's face so out of keeping with his dignity, that Pierre stopped and glanced inquiringly over his spectacles at his guide. Anna Mikhalovna evinced no surprise. She only smiled faintly inside, as if to say that this was no more than she had expected. "Be a man, my friend. I will look after your interests," she said in reply to his look, and went still faster along the passage. I think they all already know the situation. It's like the Count's dying and everyone's trying to get his money. Pierre could not make out what it was all about, and still less what watching over his interests meant, but he decided that all these things had to be. From the passage, they went into a large, dimly lit room adjoining the Count's reception room. It was one of those sumptuous but cold apartments known to Pierre only from the front approach. But even in this room, there now stood an empty bath, and water had been spilled on the carpet. They were met by a deacon with a censer, and a servant who passed out on a tiptoe without heeding them. They went into the reception room familiar to Pierre, with 2 Italian windows opening into the conservatory, with its large bust and full-length portrait of Catherine the Great. The same people were still sitting here in almost the same positions as before, whispering to one another. All became silent. All became silent and turned to look at the pale, tear-worn Anna Mikhalovna as she entered, and at the big, stout figure of Pierre, who, hanging his head, meekly followed her. I wonder why. Did they receive bad news or something? Anna Mikhalovna's face expressed a consciousness that the decisive moment had arrived. With the air of a practical Petersburg lady, she now, keeping Pierre close beside her, entered the room even more boldly than that afternoon. She felt that as she brought with her the person the dying man wished to see, her own admission was assured. It's like, exactly. We already know the Count's fond of Pierre, so the meeting's not going to go poorly with the Count. Like we know that as the readers too. Casting a rapid glance at all those in the room and noticing the Count's confessor there, she glided up to him with a sort of amble, not exactly bowing, yet seeming to grow suddenly smaller, and respectfully received the blessing first of one and then of another priest. "God be thanked that you were in time," said she to one of the priests. "All we relatives have been in such anxiety. This young man is the Count's son," she added more softly. What a terrible moment. His illegitimate son, by the way. I don't think he's been legitimized yet by this point in the story. Which I'm not exactly sure. Look, I think it's ridiculous on some level. It's like, he is the son. Like, Pierre is the Count Bezukov's son. Like, that's just the fact of the matter. Having said this, she went up to the doctor. "Dear doctor," said she, "this young man is the Count's son. Is there any hope?" The doctor cast a rapid glance upwards and silently shrugged his shoulders. Anna Mikhalovna, with just the same movement, raised her shoulders and eyes, almost closing the latter, sighed, and moved away from the doctor to Pierre. To him, in a particularly respectful and tenderly sad voice, she said, "Trust in his mercy," and pointing out a small sofa for him to sit and wait for her, she went silently toward the door that everyone was watching, and it creaked very slightly as she disappeared behind it. Pierre, having made up his mind to obey his money trust implicitly, moved toward the sofa that she had indicated. As soon as Anna Mikhalovna had disappeared, he noticed that the eyes of all in the room turned to him with something more than curiosity and sympathy. He noticed that they whispered to one another, casting significant looks at him with a kind of awe and even servility. A difference such as he had never before received was shown him.
strange lady, the one who had been talking to the priest, rose and offered him her seat. An aide-de-camp picked up and returned a glove Pierre had dropped. The doctors became respectfully silent as he passed by, and moved to make way for him. I wonder if they already know that he's in line to be the heir of Count Bezukov's fortune. So they're all kissing up to him now to try to get rich, try to get in on some of the money. At first, Pierre wished to take another seat so as not to trouble the lady, and also to pick up the glove himself and pass around to the doctors who were not even in his way. But all at once he felt that this would not do, and that tonight he was a person obliged to perform some sort of awful rite which everyone expected of him, and that he was therefore bound to accept their services. Like, famous people probably have this going on. It's like, you wonder who your real friends are, because everyone's being nice to you because they want to get some of your money. Yeah, any kind of famous artist probably. He took the glove in silence from the aide-de-camp and sat down in the lady's chair, placing his huge hands symmetrically on his knees in the naive attitude of an Egyptian statue. He decided in his own mind that all was as it should be, and that in order not to lose his head and do foolish things, he must not act on his own ideas tonight, but must yield himself up entirely to the will of those who were guiding him. 2 minutes had passed before Prince Vasily, with head erect, majestically entered the room. He was wearing his long coat with 3 stars on his breast. He seemed to have grown thinner since the morning. His eyes seemed larger than usual when he glanced round and noticed Pierre. He went up to him, took his hand, a thing he never used to do, and drew it downwards as if wishing to ascertain whether it was firmly fixed on. "Courage, courage, my friend. He is asked to see you. That is well," and he turned to go. But Pierre thought it necessary to ask, "How is," and hesitated, not knowing whether it would be proper to call the dying man the Count, yet ashamed to call him father. He had another stroke about a half hour ago. Courage, my friend. Pierre's mind was in such a confused state that the word stroke suggested to him a blow from something. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the semantic differences are in Russian. Like, in our language, I think it's pretty obvious, the differences. If you say someone had a stroke, it's like you know that it's a personal health issue, versus in Russia it might be the case that it's like it actually sounds like someone was hit by something. Yeah, I don't know. You might have to know more about Russian in order to understand the real similarity of the two meanings. He looked at Prince Vasily in perplexity, and only later grasped that a stroke was an attack of illness. Yeah, pretty much. Prince Vasily said something to Lorraine in passing and went through the door on tiptoe. He could not walk well on tiptoe, and his whole body jerked at each step. The eldest princess followed him, and the priest and deacons and some servants also went in at the door. Through that door was heard a noise of things being moved about, and at last Anna Mikhailovna, still with the same expression, pale but resolute in the discharge of duty, ran out and, touching Pierre lightly on the arm, said, "The divine mercy is inexhaustible. Unction is about to be administered. Come." It's like a rite of passing. Pierre went in at the door, stepping on the soft carpet, and noticed that the strange lady, the aide-de-camp, and some of the servants all followed him in, as if there were now no further need for permission to enter that room. Okay, and that is the end of chapter 22. Chapter 23 is pretty long, so we can save it for the next chapter. Yeah, it looks like Count Bezukov is preparing to die. And everyone wants to get rich. Everyone wants some of the Count's cheese. We'll have to see who actually inherits the fortune. Will it be Prince Vasily? Will it be Princess Catherine? Will it be Pierre? I don't know. We'll have to find out later on in the series. As always, thank you for watching. Gracias por todos. Musicator. And Stormer Show signing off. Have a nice night. Stay sheltered, Storm Champions.